سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. اللهم صل أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا فكانت هباء منبثا وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثا فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موزونة متكئين عليها متقابلين يطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون بأكواب وأبارك وكأس من معين لا يصدعون عنها ولا ينزفون وفاكهة مما يتخيرون ولحم طير مما يشتهون وحور عين كأمثال اللؤلؤ المكنون جزاء بما كانوا يعملون لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا تأثيما إلا قيلا سلاما سلاما وأصحاب اليمين ما أصحاب اليمين في سدر مخضود وطلح منضود وظل ممدود وماء مسكوب وفاكهة كثيرة لا مقطوعة ولا ممنوعة وفرش مرفوعة إنا أنشأناهن إنشاء فجعلناهن أبكارا عربا أترابا لأصحاب اليمين ثلة من الأولين وثلة من الآخرين وأصحاب الشمال ما أصحاب الشمال في سموم وحميم وظل من يحموم لا بارد ولا كريم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك مترفين وكانوا يصرون على الحنث العظيم وكانوا يقولون أإذا متنا وكنا ترابا وعظاما أإنا لمبعوثون أو آباؤنا الأولون قل إن الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون لآكلون من شجر من زقوم فمالئون منها البطون فشاربون عليه من الحميم فشاربون شرب الهيم هذا نزلهم يوم الدين نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أأنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم النشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أأنتم تزرعونه أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حتاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء جعلناه أجاجا فلولا تشكرون أفرأيتم النار التي تورون أأنتم أنشأتم شجرتها أم نحن المنشئون نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون عظيم إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين أفبهذا الحديث أنتم مدهنون وتجعلون رزقكم أنكم تكذبون فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون ونحن أقرب إليه منكم ولكن لا تبصرون فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين فأما إن كان من المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة النعيم وأما إن كان من أصحاب اليمين فسلام لك من أصحاب اليمين وأما إن كان من المكذبين الضالين فنزل من حميم وتصلية الجحيم إن هذا لهو الحق اليقين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم صدق الله العلي العظيم رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وضل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحدق العصام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك، وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متضلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك. ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فاده من البلاء أقلته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاه أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترز فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شدي وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودكة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هب لي لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بالنار بعد توحيدك وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته أو تبعد من أدنيته أو تشرد من آويته أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شئري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم. يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثوه يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبه وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا يقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني يا إلهي صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقة لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيتك، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج المؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، وتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانك؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تزجر زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربه؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك، فباليقين أفتع له ما حكمته من تذيين بجاهدك، وقضيت به من إخلاد معاندك. لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كانت لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقامة، لكن تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تحبلي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمت، وكل ذنب أذنبت، وكل قبيح أسررت، وكل جهل عملت، كتمته أو أعلنت، أخفيته أو أظهرت، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيته وبفضلك سترته، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلته أو إحسان فضلته أو بر نشرته أو رزق بسطته أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تغفره. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك ركي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم فيها وأعظم صفاتها وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة وبخدمتك موصولة وأعمالي عندك مقبولة حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدة وحالي في خدمتك سرمدة يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قوي على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي وهب لي الجدة في خشيتي والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أصرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المباردين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك الدنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد ومن كادني فكد واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لدي فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك واعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأقلني عثرتي واغفر لي ذلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك وعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني مناي ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاهه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقم يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بي ما أنت أهلك وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل الفاتحة.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen in Kul Arwah al-Mu'minin wal Mu'minat Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayatima Yajibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. The Seniors Committee has organized a Chalo Karbistan event on March 20th. For more information, please look at information provided in the newsletter or the WhatsApp broadcast that was sent out earlier today. Now let us invite Sayyid to come forward to recite tonight's majlis. For Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل. For the soul of Marhum Yusuf Ali Jessa, please recite a Surah Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Once again, we'd like to offer our condolences to the family of Marhum Yusuf Ali Jessa, all of his family, friends, and loved ones. Just a few words, if you don't mind me sharing. Marhum, when I was growing up, my grandfathers, they passed away, very, very early on. I didn't really have a relationship with them. So it's very rare that, I've only been able to make that sort of grandfatherly connection with, a few individuals. And I don't know, maybe it's because I lacked that when I was a child, that I guess part of my personality is that when I see these very, we call them grandfatherly and fatherly figures, there's a certain attachment that's grown. And, the same thing applies to our daughters as well, is that they didn't really have any grandfathers, at least they didn't have a strong relationship with them because they passed away very early on. So even our daughters had a, very strong connection with Bapa. Sometimes when we would want to go and visit the Jessas, we would assume that they'd want to go see Dadu and Dadi, but they say, we're going to go see Bapa and Ma. That's what they wanted to go and do. So obviously towards the end, the level of communication was, was inhibited a bit. But just his demeanor with the kids, how kids can easily tell when you're overdoing it and when you're faking it. Yusuf uncle, even just by him when he smiled at our children, that was enough just to build a connection with them. And they remembered him just like that. Out of all the other good qualities that I can remember, I think the one that I think is probably the one that sticks out in my mind the most, and that I think I'm the most jealous of, is the fact that he was such an active person. Like he was fa'al, he was disciplined. We used to stay with the justice quite a lot. So, I would wake up and then I would see him awake before me. I would see him exercising, doing work, reading, always something. He'd be going out on walks. Now, this is a person who didn't let old age or sickness or anything like that actually stop his activity and his growth. And it's, such a wonderful quality that I hope all of us, including the family of the marhum, can, appreciate, benefit from, and then carry on. To be that active and to be conscious that your activity is taqwa-oriented, that it's God-conscious, is, very, very rare as well. Sometimes you have people in the corporate world where, the workaholics, they'll spend all day working and this and that. Well, it's fine. But, marhum, his concerns, even towards the end, were still about the sharia, about pleasing Allah. I remember Rizwan uncle was, he was double checking with me because his father had asked him about a certain fiqh ruling in terms of salah. These are the things that were on his mind at the last moment. So we hope and we pray that his sins are forgiven, that his maqam is raised, and that we learn and benefit from the legacy that he has left behind. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We had a few questions on Slido. First one says, do the rules that apply for a wajib salah, wudu, tahara, etc., apply to a mustahab salah? So it depends. I think this person's probably asking in reference to salatul mayyit, namaz al-janaza. That technically is almost its own category, right? Because a lot of the rules, just like a normal salah, don't apply. For mustahab salat, like nawafil prayers and things like that, most of the rules do apply. So yes, you have to be in wudu. For example, your body should be tahir. But there are some sort of exceptions. And these exceptions usually are for the fact that they encourage the mu'mineen and mu'minat to try their best to offer these nawafil prayers. So for example, most maraji' allow you, if let's say time is short, or let's say you're on the way to a jama'ah prayer, and you know that by the time you get there, you won't have time to recite your nafilah prayer. Right? So let's say you're coming for Sunday Fajr program here. On your way here, because you wake up and now you're on your way, you didn't have time to read nafilah at home. So you are allowed to read while driving. The qibla is something that if if it's not possible, then it becomes a exceptional condition. If you can pray with the qibla with the normal rules, go ahead. But if you can't, even in your car on the way to the center for Jama'ah prayer, you can still offer your nafilah like that. And then the other rules of, obviously, you don't do ruku and sujood in your car while you're driving. You just use ishara, you look down and up, things like, well, don't look away either, like keep your eyes on the road, but small isharas, I think you know what I mean, right? Don't blame me if you get into an accident on the way. I'm saying that the rules still apply, obviously, but qibla is relaxed. The other thing which is important as well is the second surah in both rakats for a normal 2 rakat nafilah prayer is also a mustahab thing too. So nawafil prayers are already mustahab, but within them, there's a whole bunch of extra mustahabat too. So technically, you could just do Fatiha for both rakats and that would still be okay. So it just depends. If you're short on time, for example, and all you have time for is to quickly recite Fatiha in both rakats, that's okay and it's acceptable according to most maraji'. I think that's, as far as I remember, these are the basic exceptions I think that would matter to all of us here. Okay, let's go to the next question. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You said that if you talk about jinn at night, then bad things can happen to you. I would like to know if there's anything specifically bad that will happen to you. I don't know, and I'd rather not tell you anyway. And I don't want you to experiment either. Let's just leave them alone. They'll leave you alone. That's it. Okay, that's good enough. Well, I mean, the one thing I can say is that, a person's imagination will start to go, I'm not into horror movies, but those of you who are, let's say you watch it at night, and now all the lights are off at night, and now you're ready to go to sleep. You start hearing things and seeing things, right? Because you just saw a scary movie. They say that jinn play on this fact. They play on the power of your imagination. They'll start to make you see things and hallucinate things, and then you'll start to freak out, and then it can get worse from there. So I think I'll leave it at that, inshallah. Okay. Last one is wrestling haram. According to most maraja like Ayatul Sistani, hafidhahullah, most contact sports like wrestling, martial arts, anything like that, it's allowed as long as there's no fear of extreme bodily damage, right? Wrestling, I don't imagine that that's going to be the case. I guess it depends on what kind of wrestling, but usually wrestling is not that bad in that sense. Yeah, if you're talking about, let's say, full contact MMA or something, okay, maybe, or like UFC, something like that, that might be iffy, I'm not sure. But yeah, if you're not doing anything which is going to lead certainly to extreme bodily harm, then you're okay, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We've been talking about the malaika, the angels. We started with the angel Jibril last week, alayhi salam. We talked about how his name has appeared in different forms in the ayat of the Quran. In the ayat, it says Jibril. In other places, it says Jibrail. In other places, Jibrail. So there's a lot of different pronunciations. We talked about the meaning from the original Hebrew, which probably means this strength or compelling force from Allah, the Jabr of Allah. We went through some of the ayat, the 3 ayat where Jibreel is actually mentioned by name specifically. And we learned that, interestingly, some of the Yahudis of that time, during the time of the Prophet, they actually considered Jibreel alayhi salam to be an enemy. And they questioned the Prophet saying, who's bringing you revelation? When he said Jibreel is, they said, okay, now we know you can't be a prophet. So some of the Yahudis had actually taken Mikael as their good news angel, and they said Jibreel was almost like this angel of bad news and death. So that's why they could not, according to their broken logic, they wouldn't accept Islam based on that. And the ayat Allah brings are an answer to them saying that's not a good enough reason for you to reject the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Just like with Israel, we went through some of his other nicknames like Malik al-Maut. Jibreel has a lot of other nicknames as well. And all of his nicknames reflect the different fada'il, characteristics, and traits that he has. So sometimes his names are mentioned in the Quran. I'm not going to bring the ayat today, but if maybe next week or if you're interested, you can look it up yourself. But some of these are mentioned in the Quran, and these are where people have questions like, okay, what's being talked about here? So sometimes people, right, they ask about the Ruh or Ruh al-Qudus. So that's one of the nicknames they believe may be a nickname of Jibreel. So whenever you see Ruh al-Qudus, they say that's probably the angel Jibreel. So some of his names are in relation to his duties. So one of his duties is revelation. So he is this angel, this Holy Spirit, right, Ruh al-Qudus, because he is that divine connection, the kind of middleman between Allah and everything and everyone else, even Rasulullah, right? So because of that, he's this Holy Spirit. Other nicknames include Malakul Wahi, just in the same way that Israel is Malakul Maut, right, literally angel of death. Some call Jibreel Malakul Wahi, the angel of revelation. He's also been known as Ruh al-Amin, in the same way that Rasulullah is As-Sadiq and Al-Amin, right? One who is, honest and truthful and trustworthy. They say Jibreel is also the trustworthy spirit as well. And some say that it's because of his direct connection with Rasulullah, because he's bringing the truth to him, or it's because he's trustworthy, meaning that there is no mistakes in what he brings. And the reason this could be important for some people is because we know that some individuals believe that some certain sects or small amount of Muslims believe that there may have been issues in the transmission of the Quran. Some, unfortunately, place the blame on Rasulullah. Some even say that it's Jibrail's fault. There was a problem with interpretation or something like that. We say, no, he's Ruh al-Amin. He's a trustworthy spirit. Whatever Allah orders him to do, he brings that directly. And I know this ties into the idea of the free will of angels. Inshallah, we're going to talk about that in one of the future sessions. What exactly does that mean? But in a nutshell, there is no room for an angel to make a mistake. They have a level of isma as well. They don't have free will. They have an aql, but they don't have these pulls to the dunya like you and I do. Right? Okay. And the other name that he's also been given, and this has been mentioned in the Quran as well, is that he's known as Rasulun Kareem. That he is this noble messenger. Again, in the same way that our Prophet is a messenger, obviously he's bringing the message too. So he's seen as a noble messenger as well. So this first category of these 4 nicknames were all about his qualities in bringing revelation. The next category is about his ability to perform divine commands, which requires a certain ability. So two of these, they're very similar, right? One is Shadid al-Quwa, which appears in the Quran, and the other one is Dhu Mirra or Dhu Quwa, which appear in some riwayat as well, which basically means that Shadid al-Quwa means that he is intense in his power. And this ties back to the idea of him being Jabr of Allah, that when he comes, there's an intense force behind what he's doing. It's a compelling force. If you remember, right, when we talk about the different ways that revelation would appear to the Prophet, you know how sometimes it says that the Prophet would shake, he would tremble, he would sweat. Because when you're receiving that divine information, even though it's through Jibril sometimes, there was still a force that was being, because all this information now is being, if we're using modern day terms, like downloaded straight into the soul of the Prophet. So the body couldn't handle it. So there was physical effects to that as well. So they say that Jibril is somebody who had the ability to take that strong message from Allah and put it into the heart of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So that's two things. One is his connection to revelation. The other is his strength and intensity in performing divine commands. The last one is the fact that we all know him to be basically the archangel, right? He's the head of the angels. So that special station that he has with Allah and above other angels has also given him specific titles as well. So one title is that he's known as the one who's a Makin. Makin means somebody who has a makan, that they're firmly established in their place and no one can touch them where they are. Another one is muta', not muta', muta', which means somebody who they perform ita'at to them. Somebody that is obeyed. He's also known as Tawus al-Malaika, the peacock of the angels, right? Tawus means peacock. In that sense that because of the beautiful nature and strength and station that he has with Allah, in a sense, the idea of even angels having wings, we'll have to talk about that as well. But for now, just think of it metaphorically. His wings basically extend over all the other angels as well, and they are more beautiful than all the other angels. He's also known as Afdalul Malaika, the best of angels, and the final title is Namusun Akbar, the one who gives good news, or Namusul Akbar, and Akhbar. And Namus stands in contrast to Jasus. So a Jasus, we know, is a spy, somebody who is bringing, negative information. Whereas a Namus, like Jibril, is somebody who's bringing positive information. Okay, so these are all of the titles. Now what we want to start to talk about are the roles that he's had in the lives of various individuals. Now the one with Rasulullah is obvious, but how else has he been involved? What we want to talk about is first Nabi Isa alayhi salam and Bibi Maryam. Then we'll talk about how in riwayat and how our ulama have discussed how even he has a possible relationship in our lives too. He's not just somebody that brought the Quran and revelation and information to Rasulullah, but he also has a effect and interaction in our lives too. Inshallah, we'll mention that if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So in terms of the birth of Nabi Isa alayhi salam, for those of you who remember, Jibril appeared in a human-like form in front of Bibi Maryam. Right? We have a few rare instances where somebody is not a prophet, but they can still see angels. Somebody who has a station like Bibi Maryam. And we said that the Aimma, according to most ulama, they can't see but they can hear. So imagine the maqam of Bibi Maryam who's able to see and hear an angel in human form like this. And able to, she didn't recognize at first, but then she was able to interact. The other part, the influence that he had was, they say that Jibril was the one who performed this nafakha. He blew the ruh of Allah directly into the womb of Bibi Maryam. And if you remember back around Christmas time, we talked about the sort of esoteric, immaterial, metaphysical nature. Why are Bibi Maryam and Nabi Isa so, exceptional? And this also has to do with the relationship that they have with Jibril as well, right? Because even Nabi Isa is known as Ruhullah. He's getting this direct connection through Jibril from Allah. So there's a lot of metaphysical conclusions that can be drawn from this, but we discussed some of those last time, so I'm not going to open it up again. So it's clear, besides even our own Prophet, With Nabi Isa, he had a very, very high level task. But again, we say, okay, but what does that have to do with you and I? Right? What relationship does he have with us? One of the ways that they say in angels, somebody like Jibril, for example, and many other angels, one of their duties, one of their wazifas is that they come and they offer protection in the lives of mu'mineen and mu'minat. They're the ones tasked with protecting us. Now, how can that work? Let's look at a hadith from the sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. He's reported to have said, Man qal fi dubur al-farida, whoever after a wajib prayer says the following, Istawda' Allah al-azim al-jalil nafsi. They say that, under the trust of Allah, the great, the most glorious, nafsi wa ahli wa wuldi wa man ya'nini amruhu. I place myself and my family and my children and all those whose affairs are under me, I place them under the trust of Allah. وَاسْتَوْدَعَ اللَّهُ الْمَرْهُوبَ وَالْخَفُوفَ الْمُتَبَعْدِعَ لِعَدَمَتِهِ كُلُّ شَيْءٍ نَفْسِي وَأَهْلِي وَمَالِي وَوُلْدِي وَمَنْ يَعْنِينِي أَمْرُهُ حَفَّ جُنَاحَ مِنْ إِجْنَاهِ جِبْرَائِيل عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ وَحَفِظَ فِي نَفْسِهِ وَأَهْلَهُ مَالَهُ. So, after the wajib prayer, a person says that I'm placing myself, my family, everybody under the trust of Allah. Allah, whose greatness is subject to our awe. We're dumbfounded by how azim Allah is. We recognize how sometimes Allah is even unapproachable. It says, based on this, the person says, I place myself and my family and my children and anyone whose affairs I have to take care of, I ask Allah that they will be guarded under the wing of Jibril. Now, we might say, okay, how exactly does that work? How exactly does an angel come and guard? I mean, we jokingly kind of said last week, obviously an angel's not coming and putting his wing in front of us, like to protect us. So what exactly are we talking about here? There's two different ways that we can answer this. Even among our own Shia ulama, especially when it comes to Jibril and his role, there are slight differences of opinion. So some of them say that, this idea of protection and his interaction and involvement in our lives is something we should take very literally. Meaning that, let's say, we've been using the driving analogy for a while, so let's stick with that, right? Let's say you're driving, and there's somebody else on the road who's driving erratically. Now, with all other variables aside, let's say because of that erratic driver, as they're driving, let's say when they're about to cut you off, and if they were to have cut you off, it would have caused you to swerve and maybe go off the road, and you would have gotten into an accident or something like that, right? They say that when a person recites certain du'as, when a person performs certain ziyarat or certain a'mal, where the angels then are tasked with going and performing these individuals, one of the ways that they can interact is through their ability of wahi. Not the wahi like they're coming and bringing Quran or scripture to somebody, but the fact that they can come and inspire people. That whisper that can come in somebody's mind. Meaning, go back to that, again, the analogy, the example of two people driving. You're there. Now, it can work out, let's say, we can think possibly two different ways. Perhaps this angel, if you have a high station, maybe they come to you and you just get this kind of, epiphany, this idea that pops in out of nowhere, like, what? Maybe I should slow down, maybe I should just let this person pass by. Let me get out of the way. Sometimes it just randomly pops in like that. So this could have been an angel coming and protecting you with this wahi and inspiration. Again, we use the word wahi for the prophets, but over here I'm just doing it so that it's easier for us to understand. Just call this some sort of divine inspiration or angelic inspiration or advice. The other way, if it's not through you, because maybe, again, the two ways are either the angels are coming and directly telling you, or maybe because of the actions that the other driver has committed. Maybe they've done something good. The angel will come to them and they will say, look, maybe I should slow down. Like this is a little crazy, maybe I should just calm down, or maybe I should drive a little slower, something like that. Or maybe a combination of both could happen, right? You can think of how it could play out in the real world. If you remember when we were talking about rizq a few weeks back, we talked about, when you're at the checkout line, sometimes you only have a handful of items, and there's, somebody with a whole cart full of things. Sometimes even an angel, again, sometimes in terms of them helping you out with your rizq. We said time is rizq as well, right? It's not just money and finances and health. Time, opportunity cost, is also a form of rizq. Imagine an angel comes to that individual, that family that's in front of you, They get inspired, they turn around, they see you, say, oh, you only have a few items, why don't you go on ahead? Our problem is that, and we talked about this on Sunday mornings, the ideas and whispers and talk or self-talk that we have in our mind, we assume that all of that is us. Like, yeah, that's all my ideas. But that's not the case. Our mind, or more correctly, our soul is a battleground for multiple forces. One of them are the angelic forces. They are coming, constantly trying to remind us about Allah, getting us to do our wajibat, mustahabbat. Right? We talked before about how angels can come and help wake us up for Salatul Layl, or even, if it, at a different level, even for Fajr sometimes. We need that extra push, right? A push out of bed. They can come and do that. Sometimes, you miss your alarm clock or something, and you just happen to wake up. Perhaps it was an angel that was there to, kind of shake you out of bed. You also have these, to counter the angelic ones, the shayateen also come and can inspire you as well. Right? There's always these counterbalances. So just like the angels can come and try to push you towards Allah, various shayateen can come, and they can also try to take you away from Allah. Again, two ways. Either they come to you directly, and they say, just get another 10-minute nap and then wake up. You'll still be okay before sunrise. Right? That kind of whispering. Or sometimes they come to somebody else. They'll come to somebody else, and that other person will try to inspire you to do something haram or makruh or, that's bi-akhlaqi. Shayateen doesn't always mean these, immaterial jinn beings, whatever. You and I can be shayateen very easily as well. If we give in to those whispers, those ideas, and we're encouraging people to do something haram, or something which is pushing them away from Allah, we become a shaitan. Just like right now we are talking about the angels, inshallah, in due time, we'll talk about the concept of shaitan and shayateen too, because this is also another misunderstood concept. Iblis is one example of a shaitan. He is al-shaitan, if you want to put it. Like, he's the big one, but he's not the only one. In the hadith, they talk about his army, all these army of shayateen. Right? The best analogy I can give you, if you're into the matrix, is if you're still plugged into the matrix, then you're potentially an agent, right? So for anybody who's still a person of the dunya, you're still potentially part of the shayateen. And you could be doing his work unknowingly, right? So these are the sort of two, different ways that somebody can be inspired, either by the angels or by the shayateen. There are also two other voices that come. One is just your nafs itself. That could be the whispers and the ideas you hear in your mind. It's just your carnal desire. Shaitan sees that, look, this person is going to overeat. I don't have to encourage him, right? He's an overeater on his own. Or this person watches or listens to haram things, or they perform ghibah on their own. I don't have to bother. I don't have to encourage them. They're doing all the work for me. So sometimes shaitan doesn't have to bother. Or sometimes the angels also don't have to bother too, because we have trained our nafs so much that we have nafs al-lawama, for example. Our nafs is already at a stage where Allah now is directly trying to remind us about Himself. Our ruh, our soul, is directly connected to Allah. So we have this reflex, this divine reflex where we're trying to grow, spiritually grow and get closer to Allah. Hopefully we can reach that stage, inshallah. So this is the opinion of the mutakallimin. Now what about the other opinion of the philosophers and the urafa? Let's mention that quickly if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So the mutakallimin, the traditional scholars, they say, yeah, these are the sort of very direct ways that an angel like Jibril can come. He'll protect somebody with his wing, which might mean through inspiration, or maybe just adjusting variables that he has, that he can't. Maybe, he makes the rain stop, or something like that. That's the way that some ulama understand. The philosophers and urafa have a different idea, specifically about Jibril. They say Jibril represents something called al-aql al-fa'al, the active intellect. Now, I can't really go into details about what that is. In a nutshell, that is the intermediary source where you and I will get any and all sources of knowledge from. Any knowledge that we get is because Jibreel is getting permission from Allah to put it into our souls. This is a very difficult thing to understand if the way we think about knowledge is in a very materialistic, empirical way, right? If we just think about knowledge and information in terms of synaptic connections and neuroscience and all that, then what does this mean? Then you're going to say, yeah, Jibreel comes and he's connecting your synaptic nerves. What's going on here? No, that's not it. Knowledge is an immaterial thing. Knowledge is completely immaterial. It's not a physical thing. And among our metaphysicians, this is the sort of way that they describe it. They say, look, there's two different types of ways you can experience movement, right? There's physical movement and then there's metaphysical or immaterial movement. So physical movement is this, like, okay, my phone is here right now, and then if I switch hands, it's lost its ability to exist here, and now it's over here, right? It's spatial movement. Time and space are required for this thing to go. That's something physical. But what about knowledge? When a teacher teaches a child something, you teach them how to recite Quran, you teach them 2 + 2 is 4, you teach them numbers or shapes or colors, or even somebody, who's older, you teach them something else. When that teacher imparts or helps become a helpful cause in you getting that knowledge, do they lose that knowledge? Is that knowledge lost from them and then it comes into you? No. They say that there's an immaterial movement happening here. This is where Jibril sees that this individual, this learner, has made an effort and a connection. Their soul has opened up in a way where they're able now to grow. And when that growth becomes available, Jibril comes down, they say himself, as this active intellect and puts that knowledge in the person's soul. He unites himself with that information, and a person's soul begins to grow. So again, if I'm going to use an analogy, it's for those of you who play RPGs, right? If you when you level up, and then you get all these skill points, and you have to spend them, you start stacking on all these different skills, right? You start, all right, you leveled up, now you got 5 skill points to spend. So you go, add 2 to strength, 3 to stamina, something like that. So in that same way, when our soul, when our wujud, our existence expands and grows, you get these skill points too, basically. And Jibril comes and he adjusts for you as necessary. This point is actually going to be helpful when we go through one of our future topics. You know how we were talking about rizq, that it doesn't make sense to say rizq increases or decreases, that rizq just widens and constricts and contracts, that you see more opportunities? There is actually a way where you can see an actual rizq increase or decrease. There is a way that, for example, let's say you were originally predestined to only get, let's say, $10,000 in savings every year, for example. Then, perhaps, because of something that happens, now something has changed, and now maybe that risk has either increased to, 15,000, or maybe it's gone down to 0 savings. Now, how and when does that happen? Inshallah, in a future discussion, we'll talk about how risk has the possibility of increasing and decreasing. And inshallah, we will move on with this discussion next week in describing more qualities of one of the other angels, and also talking about how the angels play a role in our lives. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. See, Jibril, whenever he sees that a person is firm and he's resolute and he's determined, just like how I mentioned that Marhum Yusuf Ali Jessa was one of those types of individuals. When you open yourself up to that, when you, as the hadith say, when you have self-disciplined yourself in a way that it's called the ta'addubullah, the discipline of Allah. You're disciplining yourself for what Allah wants, then these various different ni'mat and blessings and barakat open up for you. And normally we think about this in terms of adults, right? Especially when we think and reflect upon the shuhada of Karbala. There are no people who are more firm, resolute, and determined and more disciplined than the shuhada of Karbala. We see how Abbas rejects the offer for freedom to go when Shimr, la'natullah alayh, has offered that. When other individuals, when they were made these same offers, they rejected. We see that Hur had his chance. He was firm and resolute and decided to make sure he was on the right path as well. And when we look and we start to reduce the age, we see that even the children who were amongst the shuhada, who were there amongst the family and the companions, even they had this strong level of discipline within them too. They had this adab within them. You see this in Akbar. You see this in Qasim. And even in arguably the 2 youngest individuals who gave their lives in battle, On and Muhammad. You see, they had enough insight and enough respect for their Mawla that they went to him to ask for ijazah. They saw other people, they went and they got ijazah, and then they went out to battle. But On and Muhammad, when they go and they ask Imam Hussein, Mawla, Ammu, give us ijazah, let us go out and fight. And Hussein refused. He said, no, I can't send you out. Can you imagine? This is the discipline that these children have. They come back because they know that if we tell our mother, Ma ki dua is something else. He said, our mother will be able to take care of this for us. And they told Bibi Zainab. Can you also imagine just the discipline and the resolution of Abdullah ibn Jafar, the father of these boys, who knew what was going to happen to them, but he told his wife, he told Zainab, Bibi Zainab, he said, no, because of my health, because I'm unable to come physically, send our children, take our children with you. Let them be my sacrifice in Karbala. What kind of father, how many of us are willing to give away our children like that? How many of us have disciplined ourselves like that and are ready to discipline ourselves for the Imam, inshallah, when he returns? So when Bibi Zainab sees that these children are heartbroken, and when she remembers that Abdullah bin Ja'far, her husband, has said that no, these two sacrifices must be given in the way of Islam for Imam Hussein, now she takes them in her hand. She takes each boy on in Muhammad, she goes to Hussein and says, Ya akhi, you have to give them ijazah and you have to let them go out. You have to let them fight on your behalf. He said, Ya Zainab, how can I do this? Your husband is waiting for his children to return. How can I, make somebody lose their children like this? I don't have the heart to do that. And she says, Ya Aba Abdullah, don't you know that he has sent them specifically to sacrifice themselves for you? So finally, Imam Hussein says, fine, we give ijazah. And this is where now we see Imam Hussein and Abbas begin to teach them the adab of warfare. Can you imagine these 8, 10-year-old boys being helped on a horse? Abbas is telling on when you see Muhammad, when somebody's coming from behind and trying to hit him from behind, you turn around and you go defend him. Muhammad, you do the same thing too. Never turn your backs to each other like this. Always make sure you're protecting each other, you're circling each other. Watch out and support from one another. When you hold your sword, hold it like this. I know it might be too heavy for you because you're only, a few years old. It's a little too much for you, but this is what you must do. Muhammad, when you're riding your horse, make sure you ride it like this. After giving these boys just a simple level of instruction, they sent out and they go out into battle. And when they go out, as they meet their final end and they call out, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, Assalamu alayka ya Mawla. When Imam Hussein and Hadrat Abbas come running to them and they pay their final respects to the Imam, can you imagine after this, once the women were brought on Sham Ghariba, going through there, don't you think that Zainab wanted to go to her sons before anything else? Don't you think that a mother would want to go to her own children who have been killed like this before anybody else? But when she saw Imam Sajjad's face, when Imam Sajjad had seen the decapitated body of Imam Hussein, he said that Zainab fell on top of the body of Imam Hussein and said, Rabbana taqabbal minna hada al-qurban. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا وأي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين والسيد الوسيل السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام ولي الله السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونحيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله وأتاك اليقين فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرضيت به يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مطلئمات ثيابها وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرزي الزكي الهادي المهدي وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبكم موقن بشرع ديني وخواتيم عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وعمري لأمركم متبع صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد السلام عليك أيها الشهيد السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم لعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرضيت به السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباء السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وعبداء السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الزكي الناصر السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفوضا عظيما فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا ابن السيد الوسيم السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلامه وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأحوتهم على الإسلام أشهد لك أن نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع والأخي المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زيد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل وألحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم اللهم إني ترست لزيارة أوليائك رغبة في ثوابك عفوك ورجاء لمغفرتك وجزيل إحسانك، فأسألك أن تصلي على محمد وآله الطاهرين، وأن تجعل رزقي بهم دارا وعيش بهم قارا وزيارتي بهم مقبولة وحياتي بهم طيبة، وأدرجني إدراج المكرمين، واجعلني ممن ينقلب من زيارة مشاهد أحبائك مفلحا منجحا قد استوجب غفران الذنوب وستر العيوب وكشف الكروب، إنك أهل التقوى وأهل المغفرة. السلام عليكم يا أئمة المسلمين، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا حجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب الزمان، أجل الله لك ما وعدك من النصر وظهور الأمر ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.